Yo, what's going on? This is Andrew with Lens Rentals. It is good to be back. We've got the Sigma 7200, the Sony 7200, as well as a cinema lens, the Zeiss 7200 compact zoom, and we're putting them all to the test today. So first things first is I wanted to go ahead and put the lenses to the test when it comes to photo. And there are a few things that we have to consider when comparing lenses, especially since the sensor we're using is the same across the board. We use the Sony A9 III, which is an amazing camera, great for photography, great for action sports, and wildlife. So because we use that camera, really we're looking at the optics of the glass and the ultimate user experience.
All right, first up is the Sigma 7200. Yeah, I got this like goofy rig. Not how I would normally shoot with this camera with this big old rig on it if I'm just taking photos, but at least it gives me a handle. Dude, I just got the biggest yawn. That was so sick. Luckily, this little line right here is not really moving from that spot, which is giving us a great chance to compare the lenses with a static subject. So this is the challenge with this massive lens. It requires these rails because I'm really not interested in snapping the mount off of the camera.
Both the Sony and Sigma lenses feel very similar. They both have great builds with a lot of the functionality that we've grown accustomed to, specifically optical stabilization. Looking at the first Sigma photo here, this looks great, but in order to figure out just how well the lens performed, we have to look at the image as a whole, so not just our subject. Looking at the corners of the photos to ensure that there is some good roll off, as well as the center to ensure sharpness, the lens performed well. Comparing that to the Sony E-Mount 7200, again, they look very similar. And lastly, comparing it to the Zeiss glass, again, the corners look nice and smooth and uniform. There's no vignetting. And though the center isn't sharp, I'm kind of blaming that on my inability to nail focus.
All right, I think I'm gonna switch over to video with this guy. And then we're gonna put on the next lens, which is the native Sony E-Mount 7200. And I have to say that I don't anticipate this lens and that lens being much different, but once we bust out the Zeiss, it's gonna be completely different. Of course, at the last minute, our lion that was sitting on that rock for the past 35 minutes moved, but this one right here is being sweet. What's also interesting is I did some research with the repairs team, and Sony and Zeiss both give us their lens information in regards to aperture blades and how many glass elements are in the lens. Zeiss is not willing to do that.
I don't think Canon is either.
They keep things under wraps. Yeah, no surprise Canon doesn't do that either. Secretive for what, dude? You know that scene in The Secret Life of Walter Mitty when Sean Penn is taking a photo and he says, "Sometimes I don't even snap the shutter because it's just for me."
If I like a moment, I mean me, personally, I don't like to have the distraction of the camera.
That's the animal he was taking a photo of. Right there. But I'm definitely going to snap photos because we're doing a lens test, so I'm not as cool as Sean Penn either. All right, so the zoo invited us to come check out today, on top of already letting us film here. They had an event for their new dinosaur exhibit. We got to check it out, and we did a great test with this Spinosaurus right behind Nick here. This dude is static, but he does have some movement. It was a pretty great comparison for us when it came to locked off video.
So after reviewing everything so far, it really seems pretty clear to me that all of these lenses are great, and it's really going to boil down to your practical approach to how you plan to use these lenses out in the field. I know for me, I like to have a lot of options. Using the Sigma and the Sony 70-200 is great for photography with all of the features that those lenses come with, optical stabilization, being able to change your focus range, things like that. It makes sense, especially as a hybrid shooter or someone who's going to lean heavily towards photography. Obviously, the cinema lens is going to be a cinema lens, but I will say I had a blast shooting with it, filming with it, and even hand holding it, though I complained a lot about hand holding it.
Hand holding this for photo is crazy.
I felt awesome with that lens in my hand, and I really did enjoy the quality of the images I got, though focusing was a challenge. I noticed that when using focus peaking on the A9 alongside that lens, usually it shows me my subject is in focus, right, with a little red outline. The tension is that if I'm stopped to 2.9, my focus plane is so narrow and so small that sometimes even though the outline is in focus, the center of my subject, where I really want the eye to be drawn to, isn't in focus. And that's just on me. And I can own that. There are two final tests that I want to go ahead and do with these lenses. And the first one being at the zoo, I tested optical stabilization. Obviously, two of them have it and one of them don't, but I thought it was important to show you the differences because there are some, believe it or not.
One thing I'm noticing between the two photo lenses, the Sony and the Sigma, the Sony's optical stabilization compared to the Sigma's is a lot better. There's a lot less micro jitters. I'm able to pan pretty easily and kind of have control with or without a gimbal, which is pretty sick. You guys can see here in this shot, my little movement matched with the giraffe's movement actually feels smooth, whereas the Sigma's was choppy. And obviously I can't compare the Zeiss lens because there is no stabilization in that lens. But we're gonna show you what that looks like handheld right now. Dude, this is nuts. This Zeiss lens, video-wise and photo-wise, is blowing me away.
For our last test, we're going to focus on focus breathing. And essentially what that means is when a lens is changing its focal plane from its furthest to its closest, some lenses you'll see it almost seems as if the lens is zooming in and out, and that's what you would consider focus breathing. Now, from my experience, especially as a photographer, utilizing autofocus and or manual focus, right? It's not that hard because you can always recompose. Though it affects you, it's easy to overcome. Where I've noticed it be a big issue is when you're filming something. Focus breathing can be a pain because you really don't want your image to distort that much. You don't want it to look as if a lens is actively trying to keep a subject in focus. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna set two items up here in the studio, and we're going to focus from nearest to furthest to see how the lenses do with focus breathing. And that just about wraps up the 70 to 200 millimeter lens shootout. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I had a lot of fun shooting it. Thanks to Nick for joining me at the zoo. We had a great time, and I hope you guys learned a few things. A lot of the topics that we covered today were recommended by you. I reached out via social media, put a couple polls up there, and essentially asked you guys what you wanted to know about these lenses, and you guys delivered. So if you want to get more involved here at the Lens Journals channel and you want to have input on what we're creating, and if you want questions answered, hit us up. My final thoughts on these three lenses are this. Obviously, the hybrid lenses are great for any use case whatsoever. They're light, they have great functionality, and they perform very well. That being said, the Zeiss compact zoom was an amazing lens. It was so great to have in hand, and the ability to rent it as opposed to purchasing it, because that thing is not cheap, is great, especially if you are on set, if you're a DP, if you need to bring some lenses. This could be a great move for you. All right, that's it for today. Thanks so much again. I will see y'all in the next one. Peace.